everyone. This is the last episode of IMMOOC. Playing a little boys to men. End of the road. Joe Sanfelippo. Tony Sinanis. Katie Martin. Last IMMOOC episode. Just want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. That was a special request by Joe Sanfelippo, but we'll let him speak in a little bit. We
can't talk and then you play that? Forget it. I'm talking, man. No way.
We are excited that you're able to join us. This is the last episode of IMMOOC Live. I really want to thank everybody for participating. I am in a hotel, so hopefully our Wi-Fi holds up, but even if not, we have two amazing guests tonight. Both I could call very good friends of mine. And obviously Katie Martin will be hosting as well. So we just really want to thank you for participating. We still have one more chat happening this week that will be run by Katie Martin and Tara Martin. No relation, but both awesome. And so we have some awesome guests, but I'm going to turn it over to Katie. Thank you again for joining us.
All right. Welcome, everybody. We are excited for a great conversation tonight. We have Joe and Tony, who are the authors of Hacking Leadership and also great district leaders themselves. And so we're excited to learn a little bit more about what they do and hear about the book, and then talk about the innovator's mindset and kind of the conclusion and moving forward, what we can do to continue to innovate and work together in our districts to inspire change. So I'm going to start with Joe. Will you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Well, thanks so much for having us tonight. We really appreciate it, and hope we have a great conversation. My name is Joe Sanfelippo. I am the superintendent in the Fall Creek School District, home of the Fall Creek Crickets. Go Crickets! And I'm really excited to be here. This is my 7th year in the district as a district leader, and just hoping to contribute. Stop making that face, George. I see you making that face, George. Stop making that face.
Ross Cooper is messaging, and he's so excited. He's so excited.
Of course he is. He wishes he could be here. Of course he is.
Yeah. I'm surprised he's not looking over Tony's shoulder right now.
He might be. Don't open that closet door.
Don't create problems.
Wait,
that's me. That's me. I'm excited
about everybody else but me. Ross.
That's messed up, Ross. That is messed up. Big demerits for you, my friend. All done.
Come on.
So can we get one thing clear though, and make sure that we're on the same page here when we talk about this? And I know, Katie, you're going to ask Tony for his, his background. That could take us to 8 o'clock. So let's make sure that, could you time that for me, please?
Time zones, it's already 8 o'clock, Joe. But where you're from,
sorry about that. Whatever you need to know, Tony. Go ahead. That's great. All right, go to the first question. George, just go to the first question.
All right, Tony, you're up.
Hi, my name is Tony Sinanis, and I am Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction in the Plain Edge School District on Long Island in New York. And it's my first year in that position.
All right.
Land speed record.
So we're excited to talk about the book a little bit, and we want to know a little bit more about hacking leadership. So tell us a little bit about your goal and what you guys hope to inspire readers by through your book.
So one of the things that we talked about when Tony and I were actually talking about putting this together, and we were lucky enough to work with Mark Barnes and putting Hacking Leadership together. We had a thought for what we wanted the book to look like, and just really helping leaders do things in a different way. And one thing that was really important to us is there's a lot of philosophy and research behind the reason why people do things, but then not a lot of times do we get into the actual let's just start doing something tomorrow. Let's do something different. And then how do we, work with people that, or how we deal with people that aren't really on board right away with what we want to do, but we still want to move things forward. So we're trying to give practical application to what we were doing in ways that people could start finding momentum in that change process right away.
Yeah, I think ultimately it was about taking the experiences we had along with sort of crowdsourcing a bunch of other experiences that people had shared through the PLN or, even in our physical context and try to capture them in a way that made them accessible to everyone, no matter what their skill set, no matter what their level of experience or years of experience, and to show it from different lenses. Like here, these are the things that we do, and this is how we handle pushback. And this is what we try next, and this is what we do, tomorrow, and that kind of thing. So it was really just kind of looking at it from multiple lenses. and thinking about.
One of the reasons I asked Joe and Tony to join, and this would actually be a common thread with all the guests that we've had, and I've got so many compliments on people that we've had join, is both these guys are actually quite visionary in the work that they do, but they work extremely hard. And I've had arguments with all three of these people that we're talking with tonight, and we always, like, the focus is always the same, but it's, you know, talking about those things to get there. And I think that they really all model their learning. I actually have known Tony for a while. Joe, can you talk about some of the things that you shared in your, I just saw Joe keynote the other night, and he was fantastic. And can you share some of can you share the story about kind of talking about with your staff before the book went out?
Oh yeah. So one of the things that was really important to us when we were looking at the book, both of us, was that we wanted to make sure that the work that we were doing was actually the work that we were doing, or the work that we were putting in the book was actually the work that we were doing. Because I think the last thing both of us wanted to do was have people in our spaces talk, well, that's awesome for a book, but that's not really what it's like around here. And so we gave the book to some staff members and said, will you please read this? And when you read, like, if there's anything in this book that's not right, that we're not doing, then please let us know, because we won't print it. And, you know, there's been a lot of really great reviews on Amazon for the book. And I thank everybody we both thank everybody that's written a review. But the two best reviews for me came from staff members. Mm-hmm. And they said, like, this is our school. And one of the teachers actually came in, a seventh grade English teacher came into my office after she read it, and you could tell she was just kind of really excited about it. She just looked at me, she said, this is our school. Like, this is our school. Not like this is your school, not this is the school, not this is Fall Creek, this is our school. And that really meant a lot to me. That one word changed the whole process for me, because it was ours. Like, she felt like she was part of it, and I feel like I'm part of it, and we want kids to feel like it and parents to feel like it. So this is like, Fall Creek, Wisconsin, there's 1,300 people in this place, right? There's 800 kids in the school. There's 3 bars in town. There's, 2 gas stations, 1 water tower, 1 school. That's it. So this is our place. Like, this is the hub of everything that happens in this place. And I couldn't be more proud to share that story, but I didn't want to share a story that wasn't real. And Tony felt the same way.
That's actually a lot of bars.
Yeah, it's really not for Wisconsin, man.
Hey, do you know the level of alcohol? No, I'm just kidding.
I was like, 3.
Yeah, 3, and it's one strip town.
Right. Thank you. and Tony, like, can you connect? Because I think that when you had wrote that, most of your experience was actually when you were a principal. Yeah. You want to share some of the stories from your school?
No, I think absolutely, to kind of echo what Joe is saying, like, I think what we both realized through that process of writing that book is that, leadership is as much about context as it is about the leader. And leadership is very much about learning and understanding the context so that you can sort of complete the picture. Both of us probably, Joe started in Fall Creek right after I started at Kaniag. And so, there was a history there, right? There were stories there. There were innovative practices happening there in different levels. And so to be able to sort of insert ourselves within those communities and immerse ourselves in that in a way that we could learn while we're sharing, I think was ultimately one of our goals in writing that book. And the other thing was sort of sharing possibilities. And what is possible, right? And not that it has to be exactly the same way in every place. And things that worked at Fall Creek may not have been things that we tried at Kaniag and vice versa. But I can tell you for sure, those conversations and those exchanges, and that went beyond Joe and I, really informed our practice. And so it's about seeing a challenge as an opportunity, like in terms of leadership. And that really came through. I think a lot of it had to do with the context and having the support of communities that really allowed us the space to try things and to suggest things and to consider things. And of course, as you know, and as you communicated very clearly in your book, George, it's all about relationships, right? And so if you have those at the core, then you can kind of accomplish a lot of different things.
Yeah, and I actually remember I met one of Tony's parents at a keynote that I did, and
Yes.
I think Tony couldn't come for some reason.
I was in class.
But she actually attended as a parent to learn, and that came a lot from Tony's inspiration, right? So she wanted to see what educators are doing, and I think that we talk about communication with parents, but not necessarily empowering them and actually having them where they're not just, you know, bystanders of learning, but they're actually actively engaged, so they understand why people are doing what they're doing. And she talked so wonderfully about you, so I thought that was quite powerful when I met her.
Thank you. Yeah, that's Lisa Davis. She was a PTA president and active parent, and I think that piece was very important to us, George. Engagement, for everyone, right? Not just the parents, but kids and staff. So
one of the things that you guys talk about a lot in the book, and that is really important to innovation and moving people forward, is the culture. And you guys give a lot of really great examples of what you've done. And, you know, Joe at the district level and Tony at the school, and as we move to the district. Can you share some of those examples and things that you've done to really establish that culture to allow people to really try new things and take risks?
I think a couple of things that we do when it comes to like the everyday stuff. I think the first and foremost, we talk about changing culture 30 seconds at a time, and how every interaction, there's never a neutral interaction, right? Like people walk away from an interaction either feeling better or worse than they walked into it. Nobody walks away going, meh. So, I mean, you really want to make sure that you take every opportunity to engage people so they walk away feeling better than they did when they were coming in. So that's a big deal, you know. And I think a couple of things that we do that really have helped out, and things that we've gotten and ideas that we've gotten from other people that have been wonderful, like writing, you know, starting the day with 2 positive notes to people, and actually getting up and moving and taking these notes down to people and make sure that they know that they're valued. And that was a suggestion from the Deerfield School District, Jeff Zoll, Deerfield, Illinois. Also 100 calls on the 100th day of school. It was a really cool thing. So we call, you know, 100 parents on the 100th day and talk to them. One of the things that's really important about that, though, that we really try to emphasize with people is when you make calls home to parents, don't call home and tell the parent that they have an awesome kid. Like, they already know that they have an awesome kid. Call home and tell the parent why their kid is awesome. Like, you know, I was in a 3rd grade classroom today, and I saw Aiden reading a story with a 3rd grade student, and that little 3rd grade student looked up at Aiden like he was an absolute god, and that was really, really special. And I just wanted to say thank you for that. You know, you need to be really, really specific about those pieces. So, you know, every interaction counts. We want to make sure that little snippets. You can't like do the whole come to Jesus thing where everybody comes in and you try to solve the problem. That doesn't build culture. That just solves an issue. So we want to bring people to a space where we don't want to have those, because every interaction is counting throughout the course of the time. And I got one more I want to talk about, but I want Tony to talk first.
I just wanted to say, I think the one thing that Joe and I ended up having in common without even knowing each other was that we take the work incredibly seriously. We don't take ourselves that seriously. And I think that when you can model that type of mindset in a learning organization, it frees people of some of those confines that you create yourself, right? Because you think you have to be perfect or you have to be a certain way, but it's not about that, right? It's about a process. It's about iterations and knowing that you're not finite, right? Just because you're the superintendent, you're not done learning. Just because you're a principal, you're not done learning. And so I think those two things, that notion of taking the work really seriously and not ourselves, but also putting the learning at the center of what we do and model that, you know, for our staff and for our kids. Like, my kids at Canning knew that I was doing my dissertation, my doctorate. They knew when I was, you know, away for a weekend in class, and they knew when my, you know, when the thing got done and I graduated. I shared that journey with them because I wanted them to see, you know, their principal as a learner too. So I think that contributes to culture.
And I appreciate you sharing that, because I don't think anyone takes Joe seriously. So
they don't.
That's right.
They don't.
So that's good. One of the things that we did,
you know, he's in agreement with most people. So
good.
I want to ask Joe, one of the things I saw about the welcoming of the new principal, I really wanted to share that story, because I thought that was amazingly powerful.
So I'm going to share it in 2 pieces, because we did something this week, George, that's going to like floor you. I hope it will, because it was really, really cool. So when we hire people in Fall Creek, we treat, you know, when we make the hire, we treat it like you got drafted by a professional team. Like you get the press conference, you get the podcast, you get the t-shirt and the hat and the big background and all that stuff. And we try to introduce you to the public before you actually get there. So we did it with our principal, where we did this whole press conference thing and had our principal come up and answer a couple of questions, you know, just like it was staged and everything, but people knew it, right? And then we took a picture of him and took a picture of his family in all gold cricket gear, put that out to the community, and 9,000 views and 300 likes before this guy stepped on campus. Mm-hmm. People knew who he was and that they wanted him to be there, which was a huge deal for us, right? But we do this with our hires. We make sure that they feel like that we're the place that they want to be. Like if they're ever going to get another offer from somebody, they're going to think back to when we made the offer. So it was this week, actually, we interviewed 2 people, right? For 2 positions, a math position and a special ed position. And for both of them, one of the cool things about what we do here is we always let the interview team offer the job to the candidate, right? So I'll call whoever's interviewing, and I'll say, you know, I have a couple more questions I want to ask you. So if you could come in, we'd really like that. So they come in, and then I move them into like either a conference room or their classroom or wherever they're going to be. And when they walk in the room, the whole team is there that interviewed them, and they offer the job to the candidate. So now you've got the candidate walking in and gets excited. You got the interview team who spent all that time making the right decision. They're empowered to do it. And so now you got this big happy, you know, mess. We give them the gear and all that stuff. But this week we actually we took it one step further and we videotaped it. So we've got a recording of that candidate saying yes on their first job, or it was their first job.
No pressure, right?
Yeah, right. So and then we video. So now they have, and I sent it to him. I asked him, "Is it okay if I keep this? I'll delete it right in front of you right now. If you don't want it, I'll delete it right now. But if you want it, I'd love to share it with you because I think your family's going to love that." And then when we finalize the hire, and I can tell them you can send that out, then not only are they going to send it out, but guess who else is going to put it on their Facebook page? Their parents and their aunts, their uncles are going to send it out. And then our district is going to be in the center of all that stuff. It's a big deal because now they feel like they're part of something bigger.
That's awesome. And they are part of something. You guys are changing how we bring people in, and what a way to make people feel special.
Needless to say, he didn't do that for me when I collaborated with him, when I agreed.
You didn't get that?
I didn't get the news conference.
Yes, that's not true. I got a picture of you with the hat, the umbrella. I got a picture of the whole thing. I gave you all kinds of stuff.
You did come to Kenny, I guess. True, you did.
So Tony, and Joe, I really appreciate that, because I think when you, like, one of the concepts, obviously, I talk about in my book too, is the notion of empowerment and ownership, right? And I think that that is, like, you said it earlier, you know, talking about our school, and that is when they have that process. And I think that I think it was Shelley Burgess last week said, you know, it's much harder to tear a culture down that you built. And I think that was powerful. Now, Tony, I just, there's lots we can talk about from the book, but I want to talk about your new role and moving from principalship to like is it associate superintendent, assistant superintendent?
Assistant, yes. Mm-hmm.
Right. It's not assistant 2, it's assistant superintendent.
Yes, it's not assistant 2.
Okay, so one of the big tenets of, you know, what I talk about is how we embrace change and what we do with these new opportunities. So can you talk a little bit about how you're kind of rethinking the role of what you're doing and what you're trying to do, like in a brand new position, like not only in a brand new position, you're trying to rethink on how that position is done.
Let me tell you, it's been a very humbling experience in a lot of ways, which is a good thing. And it kind of allowed me to reset. You know, I went from a space that I was in for 8 years where I had amassed a lot of social capital through a lot of intentional relationship building to now going into a place where I didn't know anyone and I didn't really have relationships. Mm-hmm. But what was different this time around were that there were perceptions about me based on my tweets or based on my blog or based on my books. And so I had to kind of navigate that to sort of clarify that what I personally believed, although it would inform my professional practice, was not what I was going to step right in and do. You know, just because I'm not a fan of homework, it didn't mean that I was going to walk into the first principals meeting and be like, all right, we're doing away with homework. Let's get rid of it. Because I have to recognize that within the context of this community, different things are regarded as, you know, priorities. Different things are regarded as sort of unimportant. And I have to get a sense of that. And so I spent a lot of time initially just immersing myself in the community, speaking to the principals, speaking to teachers, visiting classrooms, talking to kids, talking to parents as much as that was an opportunity, because I had to learn them as much as they had to learn me, and probably even more so, because my job was to support the learning and the teaching. And the only way that I could support the learning and the teaching is if I understood what it was, if people trusted that I valued where it was, and that I wasn't just going to make change for the sake of change. And so those are like pretty tricky things to navigate, because whether we realize it or want to, accept it or not, there are perceptions layered over, this is what he's going to do because this is what he's done before, or, this is what he said, so this is what's going to happen. And so to get people to understand, it's not about Tony Sinanis, educational leader. It's about Tony Sinanis working within Plain Edge and being your assistant superintendent and serving your community and meeting you where you are and going from there together, So
it's actually a really interesting thing to think about. Like, we talk about how people, like, when you go to a new community, when you're new somewhere, people are Googling you, and that, fear of change coming with a person that has like such a history online and sharing those things. And I appreciate you kind of talking about the idea, and I'm really big, like, people know me for talking about change, but the idea is that, like, you have to start where people are at, not what you want them to do, and understanding I hope that when I share ideas at a conference or, when I'm working with a group, that they never carbon copy exactly what I say, because the thing I always say is that, you know your kids better than I do. So you have to take some of these ideas and remix them for your own. And I think that's a really important thing to share, Tony, because I think a lot of people look to make their name when they go in, and they'll change all these things. So as opposed to understanding and like build, like, your name is built on how you connect with your community, right? I think that's really powerful.
And I will say, actually, very early on, someone sat in my office and said, "We know you're here to prove you have to prove yourself." And I was kind of like, okay, I do, but I'm hoping that I prove myself as someone who's here to support this community, not here to make a name for Tony. I've already made my name, right? Like, my name was what they gave me, and I've been blessed to have really positive experiences in different educational contexts. But in Plain Edge, I'm just like everyone else, and especially as a new guy, I'm even, in a totally different position. And so that was very insightful to me when someone sat at my desk and said it, "You need to prove yourself." And I was like, oh, okay, let's think about that. Let's unpack that. So.
Well, and Tony, I think something important that you said is you had a lot of social capital in your previous school that you built intentionally over 8 years. And so your acknowledgement that takes time in a new place, you have to rebuild those relationships. You don't just come with your history and plop that into something else, that now you're getting to know a new community. And I think that's huge. And it's so important for every time a teacher meets a new class, whatever you did the year before, you have a new group of kids that you have to build a relationship with. Same with principals. And I think that, if we really believe that relationships are at the crux of everything we do, you intentionally have to build those everywhere you go. So I appreciate you acknowledging that and really highlighting that for everybody tonight.
My pleasure.
Yeah, one of the things that's really important when it comes to like how that structure takes place is that we always think about things here as what happens if Joe goes away tomorrow.
Right.
Will the thing stay in place, or will the new person come in and take over and like change the whole thing? The things that we feel the most comfortable, the most like passionate about here, like our professional growth model, that's totally staff run, and it's just like we treat it, just like Genius Hour for adults. That whole process, if I was to leave tomorrow and somebody else was to come in, that process isn't getting touched, because that is embedded in what we do. The idea that we are learners at every level. And all we want people to do is wherever they're at, go get their A to their B, whatever that is, that is. So if I leave tomorrow, that process is totally embedded in what we do, because it was completely staff driven from the beginning to right now.
Let's talk about that, because I don't know if that's true. And I think this is like one of the things that we want to talk about is like real things. And I know that if you have, do you really believe this? And I think this is a really important thing, is that I think that you've done amazing things to build a culture, but I've also seen where someone new comes in who might not, have the same vision as you, tear that down, no matter how good it is, right? Like, is that like?
Can I say something to that?
How do you ensure that? Because I think that a lot of people have felt that in their schools where they've had like a leader who set up the culture, everything's amazing. Someone comes in and just like this, I don't want to say destroys, but totally changes the direction, right?
Yeah.
George, you said something to me a couple of years ago about Kaniak being like, so the tweeting and the Instagrams and the posts and the hashtag in our story was I the singular voice behind that story?
Mm-hmm.
And it caused me to pause because I think on some level I was like, oh shit, he's right, I might be. And I said shoot.
Feel free to swear whenever you want. Then that's great.
But the other piece was no, it's not exactly accurate. But I know moving forward that I have to build capacity with intentionality of the people around me. So when I left Kaniag, our entire staff had bought into the value on some level of the work that I started modeling initially, but then became a norm because it was something that everyone valued. And I could tell you now that if you Google the Kaniag hashtag, it is still thriving. It is still, blooming. And the new principal, her name is Gina. She's amazing. She embraced a lot of it, but she also gave the teachers a space to let it manifest itself in the way that made sense to them. But I will say that came as a conversation, as a result of a conversation with you. And so I think if we are thoughtful about it and we make it a collective experience, there's ownership. And when there's ownership, that's the key to sustainability. And it's not about a person, but it's about a belief, right? It's about a norm. And so that's all I'm saying.
So George, I totally understand where you're coming from. And I agree with you to a point. Like, here's the thing. If this was Joe's initiative and I just the passion was coming from me, then it wouldn't last. Now, having said that, if somebody comes in and wants to wipe the whole thing out and this be autocratic across the board and take it all out, then yeah, they could. Would they get a fight? Absolutely, because the professional growth model that we put in place wasn't built by me. It was built by staff. So now it wasn't like, like Joe put this together. It was like 6 staff members put a process together that worked for them. And I just supported that throughout the course of time. So I think that's where it comes in. Now, having said that, would the next superintendent here be tweeting as much or doing as much? I don't know. I can't answer that question. Right. I can't answer the growth model question because it wasn't me that drove it. It was the culture of the building that drove it.
And I think one of the comments my former superintendent said to me, and I think it really resonated with me, is that if you're really good at leader, you will take all of the good things that were happening, you'll build upon what's happening, but you'll also see your fingerprints will still be in that school. You know what I mean? You it's not run by you, but you can see some of the influence that's actually happening. And I think that there's 2 ways that you look at it. There's the schools where there's been the leaders that just let you do whatever you want, and they don't really care. And then someone comes in and throws people off. We're saying, well, actually, we're going to try to move in this direction. It's like, what? I can't just do whatever I want. Or there's ones that you see, and it's like it can be scary for a lot of staff people. I know that a lot of people are terrified when they get a new leader because at some point you guys are going to go somewhere else, you're going to do something else, and we know this, and people will be scared. And one of the things that I always try to tell people is that the beautiful thing about when you go to a new place, you get a fresh start, but when you get a new leader, everyone gets a fresh start, and you start from zero again. And that's a really great opportunity to actually kind of build. Some people get put in certain situations where they're not seen to be leadership material, or that they can never teach this. But now you have a different perspective, and I think that embracing that, it actually creates an opportunity. But I think it's a fear of a lot of people is that when they build something together, that one person in the right position could actually change things. So I appreciate you guys addressing that.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a question for both of you guys. Being at the district level, and the district level superintendent, assistant superintendent has a lot of influence over what happens in schools. But are also somewhat separate. Tony, I'm sure you see that moving from a school level. And so I'm curious what both of you think are kind of the most vital role of the district office leadership to influence or to support schools.
You want to go first?
Yeah. You gonna go first, or I'm going first?
Sorry, I'll go.
Sorry.
Well, first the thing is making a decision. I'm sorry. So I think that like the thing that we want to make sure that we do from a district level perspective is understand that like leadership isn't defined by the role. At the same time, you want to make sure that you value where everybody's at when you get there. I think that was the biggest thing for me, was just like, you can't just write in and say this is what it's going to look like if you don't know where people are. So from a district level perspective, I try to, make sure that we empower people to do, what they do. And there's this whole mentality of, if you just gotta get out of people's way, they're gonna do, like hire good people and get out of their way. And that's just not the way it works. Like, you may want to, hire good people, yeah, but then you support those good people in what they do and make sure that you're always, and Todd Whitaker says it too, you always make your decisions based on your best people. So we make sure that as we're moving forward, that we're doing everything we can to support the people that are doing the right thing. And those people that are struggling, we want to make sure that we help them. At the same time, we want to move everybody forward. So we're giving, voice to the people that really want to move forward.
And I will say through Joe's modeling as a central office person, who I sort of see as setting the bar pretty high, I made it a point of being in classrooms from day one. Because if I'm in charge of teaching and learning, curriculum and instruction, I need to know what that looks like. I need to know what it looks like for kids, for teachers, for principals, and that is what's going to inform my practice. I'm not going to sit at a desk and, buy a program. And I think, and even again, George, in your book, that idea of relationships, like, it's not about stuff, it's about people. I can buy you the best stuff in the world, but like Joe just said, if you need support, it's not going to look like the best stuff in the world in your classroom. And if you're a superstar, it's going to look even better than I think it can look in your classroom. Mm-hmm. And recognizing that everyone has a different readiness level, and it's our responsibility to kind of meet them there. But we need to be present and engaged, right? You can't just be reachable via email. You can't just be, okay, I know he'll be at his desk, so I'm going to call there. It's got to be, I want him to come into my space. I want to share our learning community with this person. And so I had to make sure that the district office wasn't the ivory tower. The district office was just made it a little bit harder to get into the buildings because my office wasn't in every building. So I had to get in my car to get there, but it wasn't going to change the fact that my practice was informed by the people who were doing the work that I needed to support. And I needed to, remove the obstacles and get the resources and provide the professional development. The only way I could do that is if I know where we are, not where I think we are, not where I want people to be, but where we are.
Right. Well, and I appreciate
have the conversation about what it looks like.
Yeah.
Because like when you talk about the resources, we had a conversation with people at the beginning. We had two teachers, an 8th grade teacher and a 4th grade teacher, that wanted to collaborate and do a project together. And they asked me if they could have 2 robotics kits, and they wanted to explore robotics as part of their passion project, right? Well, that conversation, after we started questioning, well, what are you really looking for? What are you really looking for? Let me help you. Turned into a global Sphero Day where we live streamed, a Sphero Day with all these kids with 50 Spheros and building chariots and connecting with Brad Gustafson in Minnesota and his team because they had already done it. So not only do we take this conversation with 2 robotics kits to a completely different level, but now they have connections moving forward that they don't need me for anymore. Right? We just made the connection. Now they've got another team in Minnesota that they can connect with on a regular basis. And now the challenges can go between states.
Yeah.
Right? But it's needed to start with saying, where are you and what resources can we help provide you? But then ask the right questions moving forward. It's not just one question, what can I get for you, right? It's what resources do you need? And I'm going to be back in 2 weeks, and we're going to talk about it again because I love this conversation and I love what you're doing, and I can't wait to talk about it again. I'll see you in 2 weeks.
And Joe and Tony, I think both of you hit the nail on the head with that it's not about just telling people where to go or giving them more and more stuff to do things with. But I love that both of you are talking about helping people and supporting them. Too often I see leaders thinking that they're supporting teachers and they're empowering teachers by letting them do whatever they want. And a lot of times that means people stay where they are, and people who want to move will move, and people who want to stay where they are, stay where they are. And so I think strong leadership that is really moving people in that same direction, I think George mentioned that earlier, it takes the willingness to engage in some tough conversations and the willingness to come back 2 weeks later and find out what you're doing and what you need and push those conversations. And too often we think that we're just going to let people go and they'll do whatever, they'll do great things. So I appreciate you guys really pushing that and highlighting your role in that. The
other thing too, I think a lot of really good people leave because they feel they're not being mentored, that they've outgrown, because we just let them, we just get out of their way. And I'm like, nah, that's like, you got to push people too. And I think that all people crave growth. And I think Tony Robbins talks about that notion of like, that's what leads to happiness is growth, is that, that you feel you're actually getting better. The last thing we're going to talk about, and then we're going to dive in some of the questions from Innovator's Mindset, is both of you are very active in classrooms. I know that you partake in there. And one of the things that I'm really adamant about is that you should not make decisions about classrooms unless you spend time in the classrooms. And you see this all the time, like I have IT directors saying, oh, it only takes 2 minutes to log in. Well, times that by 30 kids, it changes things, right? And you should understand that the process of what's happening in the classrooms. And like even reading some of the Twitter chat, someone mentioned a comment about not meeting their superintendent ever. And in my last school district, I met the superintendent, and like a 10,000 person school district, I met my superintendent on the first day that I was hired there. And they came to congratulate me, and I had a relationship with them, like as most teachers do. And so how do you find, I don't know, I shouldn't say find time, but make time to ensure that you go into classrooms, that you're not just observing teachers and students, but making sure that you're making decisions based on how you support your communities?
You have to be intentional about it, and you have to make it clear to the people you work with as well, because oftentimes I have found in my short time at central office, it's not even the teachers and the kids that are the roadblocks sometimes to get into classrooms. It's your colleagues who don't necessarily see through that lens and maybe recognize that as a similar priority. They recognize it as important. And so having those conversations. And I remember early on sitting with our central office administrative team and asking, can we start meetings after 11 a.m. so I can get a good couple of hours in the morning to be in classrooms? I know it's not going to happen every day, but, can we think about that? And I think, our superintendent fortunately was like, all right, let's talk about that. Let's unpack that. And so you have to be intentional about it, but you have to be clear about why you're doing it, right? It's not because you're, staying out of your office or you're avoiding people. You're doing it because you need to understand what's going on. I can't make a decision about literacy instruction, I don't think, until I've actually lived literacy instruction. So last week I spent 40 minutes in a second grade classroom conferring with kids, conferring with teachers, taking a small group. I tried to be in the experience that our teachers were in, so that I know what our next steps may be and what our kids need. And so you have to be intentional about it, I think.
Just to kind of piggyback on that, I agree with everything that he had to say. But in addition to that, I don't think it stops with the classroom instruction. I think it means making sure you know what the custodians do, making sure that you know what the playground supervisors do, the kitchen, staff and bus drivers and everything. Because if you're all in for everybody, you got to make time for all of those groups. And then when I first started, those aren't groups that I jumped in with right away. And I think over the course of time, if you start having conversations with people about what that looks like, then you have your finger on the pulse of the entire organization, which is really important, because sometimes, there are groups. There will always be groups. I shouldn't say it like that. Historically, there have been groups that just feel like they're not part of the organization because they do this and they're not part of the teaching staff, or they're not the the paraprofessionals, or whatever the case may be. And you have to spend time with all of those people. And one of the biggest things, one of the best movements from our perspective has been these personal day giveaways, where we take we give a personal day to a staff member, and then we take over for the staff member for that day. I did it last year with 4 people, and this year we did it with more, just because my administrative staff said, "Oh, I want to do that too." So we ended up, doubling the number, just because we had more, we had more bodies to do that. That also came from Deerfield, Illinois. They call it their Christmas Presents initiative, which I thought was really cool.
And I do think it's also very important to recognize, and this is something Joe and I have talked about, this idea that central office leadership, I believe, has a limited impact on what happens in a classroom. It's all about our teachers. It's all about our building leaders. And so, yes, while you might be the person to enact a policy or buy a program or whatever, the way it looks in the classroom, the way it unfolds, the way it impacts kids, it comes down to our teachers. And we have to be there. We have to be engaged with them. We have to listen to them, and up the chain as well. The building leadership is like critical to anything that happens within in a school district. And so, yes, the superintendent, they do a lot of work up here. They are looking at things globally and through a macro lens, but it's the micro piece that we need to be mindful of as well.
But just one second, Joe or Tony. This is I don't know if I totally agree, and I'll tell you why.
Yeah.
So I kind of make the analogy that when you have a central office, because I used to ref basketball. If you're a good ref, nobody notices you.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're a bad ref, everybody notices you, and it takes away from the game. And I think that part of that is, like, a lot of times when I talk to teachers, their central office makes a huge impact in their classroom sometimes. And like when I hear it, it's never in a positive way. When I don't hear it, when I don't hear about it, I know the central office has made a significant impact. Like, they'll remove barriers that aren't like that they can filter out. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, but if you're let's say you're taking on an initiative, right? Let's say you decided that you're going to go in a totally different direction with your math instruction or your literacy instruction. Yeah. And so the role of the central office, I think, is to clarify that vision, to provide professional development, to get the resources to do all that work. And so they do have a profound impact, for sure. I don't disagree. I wasn't suggesting that, but the way it looks after that, so the way it looks after you've made those decisions, is really about teachers and about the building level leadership. Like, I could tell you that a reading lesson should look like X, Y, and Z, but I can't tell you for sure that every classroom teacher is doing X, Y, and Z. And I'm not suggesting that it's on the principal to know for sure, but that's where the stuff happens. Like, that's where things are enacted, and that's where things are impacting kids. And so I think, I do know that central office has an impact, but I think the people that are in the schools are the ones who are.
And I agree with you, but I also I totally agree, and I think that's really important. But I've also seen, like, some people create stuff at their work because it's like they don't have enough work to do that will somehow get into your classroom and will take away from your opportunity. Right. And maybe it's a horrible thing to say, but I'm like, always be wary of someone who needs a problem for their job to exist.
Yes.
Needs something to go wrong to exist, because they start looking for issues. They start looking for problems. And I think that really hampers, I think that from knowing both of you, the thing that I can tell you about Tony and Joe is they'll never take credit for the work that they do, but they're wonderful at filtering stuff away so teachers can do those jobs. And I think that's a really important aspect, is that they downplay some of the things that they're saying, but they're making sure that teachers can just teach and do what they need to do. And I think that a lot of times like Shelly talked about last week, and Beth talked about surveying teachers to death. And it's like, God, now I got to do this. I got to teach this. I got to do this.
Yes.
And I think that's like a really important aspect, is that in both of your roles, you won't take credit, but I think that you filter a lot of stuff so you can do exactly what you're talking about, Tony, is that
yes, teachers
can teach. Let them do their stuff, and like sometimes they got to do it, but they got to do some of the crappy admin stuff, but limit that as much as possible.
Yes, that's
And I think the way that I kind of heard Tony too, or took that, is creating systems that empower people to do their work and do what's best for kids in their classrooms. And I think what George is alluding to is often central office, or sometimes they can create systems that just keep piling things on rather than facilitating the work so teachers can do their best job in the classroom and have the resources and support to do that. And I think that's a really important distinction, that central office can either create more work and more hurdles and hoops, or you can really create opportunities for people to do their best work. So I think that's go ahead, Joe.
I was just going to say that, and I think it's much easier if you're very intentional about being visible, being present, and engaged in the people's spaces. Because a lot of people will be okay with the direction if they know who you are as a person. If they just see an email from you with, oh my goodness, now we got to take this survey, and they don't know why or where it's coming from, then they're much likely to own that process. But if you've had conversations and if you've been in these people's classroom and if you've connected with their kids and you've talked to the parents about what a great opportunity their kids have in that classroom, in every conversation that you have, we often talk about like never give up the opportunity to say something great about your school. That's all part of this. Because then when you have to, when you build up this social capital, so when you need that survey, because you actually need it, not because it's something else to do, then you have people that will take it on because they know you're all in it together.
Right.
Hashtag emotional bank account.
Yes.
So I'm going to transition us guys into the innovator's mindset and some of the questions to talk about the book that really connects nicely to your book and a lot of the work you're doing. And one of the things that George talks about is that innovation it's not a skill set. It's not a list of things that people need to do, but it's about a mindset. So talk a little bit about how you support this mindset shift in people and, you know, in the work that you're doing and what you see in your district that helps people make that shift.
Joe, time to grab the book out of the garbage can.
No, it's in the recycling bin. It's in the recycling bin. We recycle in Wisconsin, man. Come on, man.
I actually just lent my copy to one of our principals, George. You should know.
Lies. This is such a lie. I can't believe you actually brought that up. Anyway, all right. So when it comes to
just before you guys answer, just so you know, Tony, you can actually buy extra copies, especially from.
Oh, I know. They want to do it as a book study. She wanted to preview it.
Okay, well, okay, that's fair. I'll take it.
I support it.
Just fell asleep. So, are you guys done now?
Back to the question, folks. Back to the question. Book sales later.
Katie's
right. Yeah.
Katie's
So one of the biggest things when it came from our perspective in terms of empowering people to do that is actually like going through that, like talking to people about. We did a lot of stuff with Genius Hour here, like 4 or 5 years ago. And one of the things that was really important to us with kids in Genius Hour was giving them the opportunity to really explore their passion, right? Because when you explore your passion, all the stuff comes out in terms of what you want to do, and it's something you choose to do. When we started doing that with adults and really valuing where they were and understanding that wherever their mindset is at that particular time, we have to value that piece, because some of the people came up with these passion projects that were a passion to them, and I kind of looked at it going, get that done in a month. But you know what? My process is different than your process. So if you value that over time, now you're valuing their thought process, you're valuing their thinking, and you're valuing their time. And when you value their time and you give them resource and opportunity to move it forward, then they're going to be thinking about this constantly. We talked about when we started this project, we said, when you go home and you sit on the couch and you explore something that you want to explore, what is it? And take that whole mentality or that subject area and let's move that into a passion project for what you want to do here. So when you're choosing to learn, what do you learn about? And then let's move it here. So that's kind of how we started the process.
In regards to the work, I can tell you that I've been doing of late in Plain Edge. Two of the things that I'm excited about is that we've having sort of anchored in this notion of mindset. We've been having a lot of discussions about process over product, right? The importance of immersing yourself in the process, and the impetus for that came from our writers workshop and how as educators we look for perfection. Like we want the final product to be amazing so everyone can look at it and see it, and we kind of miss the opportunity that the process presents us, where we can teach in to the learner and not worry about the product. So this notion of process over product has been a focal point for us, and this notion of teaching the reader, the writer, the mathematician, and not the writing or the math or the science. And they sound like really minor shifts, but they're significant shifts in mindset, because ultimately what you're doing is you're putting the learning at the center and the teaching at the sort of outer rim, and supporting that learning. And that is hard work, but giving people the opportunity to discuss those things, I think frees them of assumptions they're making about things they have to cover, things they have to get to. But no, I'm telling you, slow down. Let's talk about the process. Let's enjoy the process, or let's think about this learner and what he or she needs. And so that shift in mindset has been a focal point, at least, right now, for the work that we're doing in Plain Edge, which is exciting but difficult, right? And recognizing that takes time.
And that's a shift that George mentions a lot too. Like, it's not about the stuff; it's about the thinking. And if you get people thinking about just having the conversation, then you're going to be in a much better place.
Yeah. One of the things that, like, I think that you have to be comfortable doing, and obviously you can kind of tell someone's like, oh, I love how George argues here, right? And I think that because we're all doing this in the right, like for the right focus, we're all trying to figure out like how do we best serve our kids. And so none of us take that personal, but I think that we have to sometimes challenge some of the things that we have got away with saying, like, well, I'm not really good with technology. I'm like, oh, so you're not good at learning.
Yeah. Right.
That's exactly right.
I'm not good at learning stuff. That's what you're saying, is that you're just like, no person is innately born into a time where they just figure stuff out. Right. It's just they're more open to pressing buttons. You know, hey, I don't have time for that. Oh, it's not a priority for you right now is what you're saying. So how do we get you to see it? Because there's never been a year at your schools that teachers didn't finish report cards. And so that happens all the time. So you find time for what you make as priority. And I think that kind of getting people to reshift some of those statements where they can kind of get away from, you know, like they use it as excuses not to do things, but you just have to reframe it, because I know some people get, one of the things that I'm proud of is that how many people I can get to sign up for Twitter in a day without ever saying sign up for Twitter. They just do it because there's some pressure in the room. There's some like rethinking different, like even making people put up their hands saying, how many of you are on Twitter? And seeing the majority of people in the room and people are going, oh my God, why am I not doing this? Right? Like what's behind? I think you have to create those situations where people are not always supported. Like we talk about supporting all the time, but you need to pressure people too, because there has to be some motivation to change. You can't just let people off the hook, because then you eliminate opportunities for their kids.
And recognize that those things are coming from sort of self-imposed limitations, and a part of our job is to point out blind spots and to point out, yeah, you could try this, and give people feedback through that process. I totally agree with you, George. And sometimes we shy away from those conversations because they're uncomfortable. So when someone says, you know, I don't know how to turn on the smart board, we might walk away and be like, okay, so those kids won't have a smart board. But instead we should be having a conversation about maybe someone else in the room knows how to turn on the smart, whatever. And so I think you're right.
So
one of the things that was really cool when we started this whole process, I took sorry. So yeah, we had this. Good. You want to go first? Because my story is not really that awesome.
Go ahead. I'll follow up.
So I was going to say anyway. So when we were
some more, Joe wants to refer to himself in third person more. When Joe leaves.
Good. So when we started this process, I went to a staff meeting, and I gave out a bunch of paper plates, and I told these people in groups of 5, write down everything that's on your plate right now. Everything. I'm going to give you a minute. Write down everything that's on your plate as a teacher, right? And it was my yeah, right. Well, it was my first year. They kept writing, and I said, look at your plate and see your numbers 1 through 25. Where are students on that plate? And nobody had them higher than 10th on their list. Now, these are great people, right? But they had so much stuff going on that they couldn't even think about the most important piece of what was going on in their life, in their professional life, their students. So we talked, now here's where the pressure comes in, George, though, because I said, what can I do to take some of this stuff off your plate? And then we moved to what can we do differently, right? So I'll help with taking some of this stuff off your plate. I can't take report cards off your plate. I can't take a couple of these things off your plate that we have to do. But what can we get off your plate so you can start doing things a little bit differently? So I'm doing my part to help. But then you're going to do your part to move forward.
I love that. And I think that piece about doing things differently has to be part of the conversation. We can't just say we want change. We want kids to be learning in different ways and keep doing things the same way. And I know George has talked a lot about this in the book, and something that I really believe deeply in is that teachers create what they experience. And so when teachers... So, I mean, when we keep doing things to teachers the way we've always done them and expect them to do things differently in the classroom and expect them to do things differently for kids, it just doesn't happen that way. So both of you have talked tonight a little bit about experiences, and you've talked about empowering educators, and Joe, you talked a little bit about your professional development cycle. But I'm going to push you guys a little bit to talk more specifically. So like, what does that mean if you're empowering educators? What does it mean if you're allowing teachers to learn in different ways? If we're really creating meaningful experiences for teachers that shift their thinking, that shift their experiences, and really put them in a different place to think about teaching and learning in their classroom differently, what are some ways that, what are some tangible things that we can think about and take back to our own context?
I think first and foremost, we need to give teachers time to collaborate. So if you do nothing else, you need to build time in that. That needs to be a structural thing that exists, whether it's, common planning time at the elementary level or PLC time or faculty meeting time, whatever it is. We need to give teachers time to have these conversations, because they're not going to happen on the fly in the hallway. I mean, they happen there, but they're not going to happen at the depth that we want them to happen, so that we can iterate and evolve beyond where we are. I think it's also incredibly important to have conversations about our goals. Like, what is it that we want to do better for kids, better for ourselves, and better for our community? And look at it through those three lenses and decide how you're going to work towards those goals, and constantly be revisiting that. And that's something we did with our administrative team in Plain Edge, I could tell you. So sorry.
So Tony, before Joe jumps in, because I see him jumping in.
I'm ready. Right, let's do this. I got it. I'm
gonna push back a little bit on that, because I believe that we need so much time for teachers.
Yeah.
However, I have seen teachers, and I'm the biggest advocate for teachers, and I've seen this in schools. We can waste some serious time in collaboration. Because a lot of times teachers don't have the experience facilitating those conversations. Schools are not places where people readily push back against one another. And so I believe that when teachers collaborate and when they work together in effective ways, the best things can happen for kids. But just giving time doesn't always make that shift. So how can we help teachers to have some really powerful collaborations that make an impact on what's happening in the classroom?
I do think you need to have certainly someone facilitating that, potentially, at least to start, whether it's a literacy coach, whether it's a building principal, whether it's a grade level leader, someone that does have that skill set, right? That could negotiate that, and recognizing that pushback happens when there's trust. And people trust that you're not attacking them on a personal level, but that you're in fact just discussing an issue. Or, a flip side. I was talking to a colleague recently who's on a team, and the team is struggling with this group of kids, right? It's that class, this year, whatever. And this one teacher is not having that same experience with the kids. She's meeting them and watching them learn and grow, and they're successfully engaged. And so when they meet, the conversations devolve into, oh, they're disrespectful, whatever. Yet, when that was happening, they reached out to their building principal to say, hey, can you join us? Can you help frame this conversation? So we're focused on the solution. So we're focused on the next step, as opposed to just being mired in that. You do have to validate that those problems exist, and you need to give people time to voice those problems. But then it's like, all right, and there are protocols for that. I mean, you can find protocols that structure conversations as much as you want. And there are tuning protocols, so you can take people through that process and fishbowl it. We're going to sit here in the middle, and everyone else is going to sit around us, and we're going to show you how you can have a conversation about that reading lesson and how it could better meet the needs of your kids, because it did not this time, that kind of thing. And so those things I think are important as well.
Absolutely. Protocols are huge in providing that space for people to take risks in conversations.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Joe, you're just dying here, right?
I am. I'm going crazy, man, because I agree. I agree.
I just want you to summarize. I just want you to summarize what Tony just said.
I know. I agree with them.
I want to talk.
I agree with them to a point, but I think that there's another level to it.
2 ears, one mouth, Tony or Joe. 2 ears, one mouth, buddy.
Oh my gosh! Like, I don't know. Right, listen first. So you're listening, but you're not hearing. Is that how it works?
Right.
Hearing, but not listening.
Listening, but not hearing.
So I agree to a point, but I also think, like, when you're talking about, we can waste a lot of time in collaboration. I think that people have to experience what, they have to experience the process of the ownership first. And here's, like, one of the things that we really kind of dive into is making sure that people have time, resource, and opportunity moving forward. You want specific things that we're doing. There are multiple days throughout the course of the year where people are working on their passion projects. The only agenda, we have three professional development days throughout the course of the year where the only agenda item is lunch, and you have to go. Like, you have to be there, right? So, but you have time to explore, and then we set up our mentors for this process where they're available all day to connect with you, but we're not walking around like doing the whole babysitting thing. Like, what are you doing? Are you, hanging out in your classroom? At the same time, the first year we did that, nobody came to us and talked to us. Every year since, we have people in our office all the time just having conversations about where they want to go. And once your staff experiences what ownership and learning really is, like honest ownership of it, where you're not blasting for what you're helping move them through the process and valuing where they are, then they can move that to student learning. they're not going. I do believe that they're not going to allow kids to experience and own their learning until they know what it feels like themselves. And once they do, and then not only once they do, they get a chance. You actually can, that they can do it. But at the same time, you can then, if they're not doing it, then you go in and have the conversation. When we do our surveys at the end of the year about our professional growth model, we got last year, our survey said 94% of our staff, 94%, agreed or strongly agreed that the process makes them a better teacher, right? So now we can go into a classroom and say, if they're not letting kids own their learning, and you can have the conversation with that teacher in that, you like our model, right, where you own the learning. Well, what if kids felt that way, right? So now you can actually move that conversation because they've experienced what it feels like.
The conversation that you guys are having, I think a really simple thing, because I see a lot of comments on Twitter talking about the importance of time. I actually remember, I think it was about 5 years ago, was my first trip to Australia, and I spoke there, and they told me, hey, like, we want you to talk, and then we're gonna have a 30-minute break for like tea, and I'm like, 30-minute break? Like, am I gonna pee for 20 minutes? Like, what am I gonna do here for this time, right? Like, it was such a unique thing that I had rarely seen in North America, that you'd actually have a break in the morning that long. And what I noticed with them is that they were like, I had shared some ideas, and then they were having break, and they were actually talking about the conversations in some informal ways. And I think that sometimes we get too over with time in those breaks. Like, those breaks are actually really good learning times too, when you just network. Like, a lot of people will say to you, oh, the best part of that conference was just the conversations in the hallway. And I think that we don't do that well enough on professional learning days, because we're like, oh, we got to use our time so effectively, and everything's got to be here too. And a thing that I've been doing a lot lately, I'll take a video with Twitter, and a lot of you see me doing this. I'll do a video interview, and then I'll say, okay, I'm going to give you like a 25-minute break. You do whatever you need to do, but within the 25 minutes, you need to do this Twitter video. You need to do a reflection. And if you have no idea what you're doing, it's not my problem. Figure it out. And I tell people that straight up. Like, the one rule for this activity during the break is you are not allowed to ask me. That's the only rule. I will not help you. And I think what I'm trying to do there is that they learn to depend on one another, or they figure out questions on their own, not going to the expert who they deem is to be the expert in the room. And that kind of goes to the notion that David, I think it's his name's slipping me, the notion that the smartest person in the room is the room, and actually tapping in. But what I do is very intentional, is I give them time to make that happen. And the feeling and the power of them figuring out themselves is something that lasts with them, as opposed to be step by step. And I think you have to throw out some of those times. And like, I even give people prompts for things to discuss at their tables, and I distinctly tell them, if I walk by your table, please don't pretend that you're talking about what I asked you to talk about, because that's so annoying to everybody, and I can totally tell you're doing it. Your professionals in the room. If you need to talk about something that's sticking with you that obviously has to do with this topic, I know you'll do that, but we're going to come back to this at some point. And I think that treating professionals like professionals is one of the best collaboration tools, that you do this, but you do have to create, compelling learning opportunities for them as well, but give them the time to discuss, and not necessarily put everything in a framework where they're so constrained by it, and just, let people kind of go.
But also, in that same space, recognize that you have some people who are introverts.
Yeah.
That their approach to collaboration looks very different than what an extrovert might do in a collaborative experience, and they need that, that 30-minute break you just talked about. They may need 20 of those minutes to really process this. Not necessarily they have to be isolated, but they process it in a different way. And that has been eye-opening for me over the last couple of years, in recognizing that some of the educators that I work with are introverts, and they don't collaborate in the same way. And what could almost look like being like not collaborative, because they're sitting through a meeting in a different way, is not at all that. It's being processed in a different way. And I think, and what you're saying, George, is about that, is giving people that time to figure this out, and how they can make it work, right? Where they find their entry point. So.
And just on that one thing, we just led a session, our team, last week with a bunch of educators, and we were talking about what they were going to take back to their schools, but they had to create something as a group. So they had 2 hours to spend some time creating something after they had just learned a lot in the morning. And it was fascinating to watch educators who didn't know each other work in groups. So they selected groups of 4 or 5, and they had a deadline. They had an exhibition that they had to present something to the entire conference. It was amazing. But watching them get into those conversations, it was tense, and figuring out what they were going to work on. They didn't have like a final product. It was wide open, and there was some struggle. And I think we don't honor that struggle and collaboration enough. And educators, we try to put it in these boxes, and we give kids tasks and labels, and we say, this is your role, and it's going to be nice, and you get along with everybody. And collaboration isn't that clean, and learning is messy, and all of that needs to happen. And when we're not open about it, we don't always create those opportunities for kids. So I think the more that we can put educators in positions where they're truly collaborating with people for some authentic task, they can then engage in that process and reflect and figure out how they can better support that at their own sites and for kids. Because it's not easy. We all struggle with it. So I think we just need to be more open and transparent about the work it takes.
Katie's going to ask one more question, then we're going to take viewer questions, but I just want to acknowledge a comment, Jim Windage. I wanted to try, and sorry, I'm saying, Jim, I apologize if I'm saying your last name wrong. It says, I want to try that type of break with my students. Time to discuss, but these tasks must be completed too. And that's kind of, I think, what Katie alluded to earlier, is that the hope is that you create that for professionals, you create that for teachers, and like, man, I'm going to try that with my kids. Because that's the hope, is that you experience it, you're more likely to recreate it. And Katie talks about that all the time. So I know Katie has one last question for the group. And then we're going to take if you have any questions for Joe, Tony, myself, or Katie, please tweet them out, and I'll keep an eye on that. But okay, I'll let Katie ask the last question.
All right, it's a toss-up. There's some good questions. I came up with some good ones. So I guess the one that I'm interested, especially with you guys at the district level, measurement of growth and really looking at how we're defining success is nationally defined, but we're looking at some other approaches. So I guess the question, and it is towards the end of the book too, is how do you measure growth and innovation, and how are you highlighting the process, as Tony said earlier, but also really being able to show stakeholders that we are making progress towards our goals?
You look at sustainability, I think. And so I think innovation is about how long it takes for something to become the new norm, to become like a habit, almost like part of routine, not like a bad norm, not like where we're not being creative, but it becomes a sustainable part of the fabric. I think, so there are a lot of data points. We can look at a lot of numbers, and we can look at test scores and all those things, because that's, part of the federal and state mandates that exist. But we know that there's a lot of soft data that we should be looking at as well, and we should be triangulating data, right? And looking at multiple data points to determine whether or not our kids are growing, our teachers are growing, our leaders are growing, our community is growing. And I think sustainability is a big part of that. And so, as I listen to both of you just speak, the thing that kept going through my mind is, I think about inquiry-based learning or project-based learning, and it's more about the inquiry than it is about the project or about the thing at the end. And, it's something I think we should be thinking about as educators as well in the work that we do. And that's another thing that I think you can measure in different ways. You can use rubrics and surveys and whatever, but looking at the sustainability of something, I think is paramount.
So when we started this process a couple of years ago, we were at a district that exceeded expectations from the state testing level. And one of the things that we made sure that we told the community when we started was our test scores may dip a little bit. And because, we're not all about the content. We can teach your kids a bunch of content and they can do great on the test, but are we creating test takers, or are we creating learners? So we talked about how is it important to create learners and inquiry based on what we're doing moving forward. And we feel like as we do that the test scores will be fine moving forward. But we really want to talk about what does it take to create a learner, not create a content regurgitator. So in doing that, it was really important for us to have that conversation with our school board, really, to say, you need to understand that this is a process and we got to be okay with the process, because what we want to do is create authentic learning experiences for kids that really aren't based on what the test is going to have to say. And then in doing that, that's been a really good conversation. We're not nearly there yet, but then when we have like seniors in high school talking about how they think that they should have a capstone project to move forward and graduate, and then it was the impetus to have a conversation with the principal and a couple teachers about getting that moved into what we actually do, and now it's going to be a requirement at some point. Like, that's real voice for students there, talking about like what they think that we should be doing to make sure that they're better prepared for whatever happens when they get out of here.
And the thing that is really hard is, I appreciate you sharing, is that we always talk about, challenging when things don't work. But I think what's even harder is when challenging when things are perceived that they've worked, that challenging success. Because a lot of people have worked in those schools where the kids are amazing, getting amazing grades, but they come from affluent communities and, they have all of these advantages to them. And I've challenged teachers and said, if you really believe this is 100% because you're teaching, you should be able to go to any school in the world and be able to get those same results. And that's not a reality. And I think that you have to understand that. And we have to, whatever community we're in, our focus is to help them grow as well. Is that not just that, let's do well on a test, but that these kids, we give them every opportunity we can and help them become better, not only at learning, but as people as well.
Well, it was.
Sorry,
go ahead. I'm sorry. It was important for us to put that out there, honestly, George, because we sent that to the community too. We sent that to the parents to say, this is, we exceeded expectations from a state perspective. Having said that, this score does not define us. Right. Nor will it define us if we fall off a little bit, because what we're going to do with your students over the course of the next couple of years is create learners as opposed to understanding like what this test is about, right? And once the parents saw that, now not only do the parents understand that, but guess who else does? The teachers. So that gives them, license to go out and risk take, because they're not worried about what the score is going to be as much. Now they still will, because they've lived that for 15 to 20 years. But if we give them the license to say, the creative license to say, go risk take and see what happens, now we've got at least some momentum moving.
Well, and I think the important part there is no vision statement that I've ever seen says that we want to create great test takers.
Yeah.
Yet, when we look at what we're assessing and what we're measuring and what we value in districts, are we overly emphasizing the test and not really supporting people to develop the creative, complex thinkers, problem solvers, all the learners, whatever we say in all of our vision statements? I think it's important to look at how are we actually measuring that and supporting people to get there, that is not just narrowly focused on passing or doing well on a state test.
Great.
And no, like, as you said, none of them focus on test takers, but none of them focus on compliance, and schools have traditionally been really good at that. There's never a time like, man, we are going to have the most compliant kids ever. Yeah. This is our vision, right? That's how we define success. So I'm going to give you one question, and let's try to do shorter answers here. Okay, Joe?
What are you talking about?
Right.
What are you talking about? Yeah. I got 30 seconds. 30 seconds. Brevity, man. I got this.
I'm gonna give this one to Tony. Sorry, Joe. 30 seconds. So how can teachers advocate for their professional learning needs? So think about in a situation where you're a teacher, maybe not in a situation where they have two phenomenal leaders like you. How can they advocate to meet their own professional learning needs? This is like Trivial Pursuit, the way you're looking at it.
I'm trying to think, I'm thinking two things.
Want some Jeopardy music? And so
I'm thinking,
how can teachers advocate for their professional learning needs and answer in the form of a question?
Okay, so what is a self-directed learner? So,
nice.
Yes. Quite impressive.
So
don't talk anymore.
No, you cannot give that extra 28 seconds to Joe, please.
I won't.
I'll take that. I want that.
You can have it, but that's really what I kept thinking as you were building up with that question. I was like, I'm thinking about a self-directed learner, because no one asked me what I wanted to learn as a principal. Because you talk about teachers learning, let's even talk about leadership and their learning, because that happens even less. I took it upon myself to find my gaps. Again, not aware of every blind spot, but certainly aware of my gaps, and try to fill them in with people like you all, and others, through those connections. And it doesn't have to be social media, but I think there is something to be said for a self-directed learner who capitalizes on like social learning theory, right? The idea that you learn from others through interactions, like you said, and like Joe said in the
he's going over 30.
I was going to tell you to stop him.
Yeah.
done.
With the two.
That was awesome, Tony. You should have stopped when I told you.
So,
gosh.
Okay, last one. This is one. I think this one's for you, Joe.
Right.
This is from Rebecca.
C. None of the above.
Answered in a question like I did, Cricket.
Yeah. Rebecca, you talked about Genius Hour with your staff, right? You alluded to that, Joe?
Yeah.
Tell a little bit more about that process in 30 seconds less in the form of a question.
Pick your passion, anything that you want to learn. Don't start with data. Start with your passion. So you're showing everybody that you're a learner. And then once you get your passion, we'll figure out how to measure it as we move forward. But you always start with your passion. If people want to know more about it, I'll post the link with the hashtag because we have our whole process is online for people to see.
That wasn't in the form of a question.
Because is it awesome? No. So we had 6 teachers that put it together, and I could not be more proud of them, honestly. Like I am so proud of the fact that they pushed each other to make a process that worked for their staff. It's awesome. And now they're talking to people all over the place.
All right, Joe. Joe,
I'm kidding.
Okay, well, it is. We've already gone over 17 minutes, and NCAA basketball is starting. Not that I notice.
Not that you.
I couldn't tell either. I couldn't tell that you didn't notice.
You're looking over there the whole time, George. Right. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. So. I want to honor people's commitments to watching the NCAA tonight. So I think that's important. I just want to, first of all, I want to thank Joe and Tony. If we had leaders that, were like you all over, schools would be in much better shape. And I think teachers would be very happy. You could see by the comments on Twitter and in the YouTube live chat. So thank you for taking the time, sharing your passions. And thank you, honestly, just as a side note, for being easy to being brilliant and easy to work with, because I think that we don't do that enough where we can actually just have fun, right? Like that we can have these academic conversations but just joke around too, because I think it makes it much more rewarding for everyone. I want to thank Valerie. Oh my God, I'm gonna say her name right. Valerie is amazing. She's been curating all of your awesome content every week. I want to thank Tara Martin for helping run the Twitter chat and all the support she's had. Katie Martin, you're the best. Seriously, thank you for everything you do. I know Katie has got a book in her at some point, and when we do IMMOOC again, I am hoping that there will be release soon after, because I'm going to keep pushing her to write a book because she is brilliant and I'm honored to work with you. And I want to thank everyone for participating. It's kind of sad that, this is the last one for a little while, but I'm sure we're going to do it again. And thanks for all the people that participated in the first IMMOOC and came back to support other people to actually do this and make it a much more rewarding experience. This has been insanely easy for me because of all the awesome people that have done this. So I really want to thank everyone for taking part. Katie, you want to say anything before we shut down?
Just want to echo that. The team has been amazing. All the people who've been working together and sharing, and just really proud of what people have done. And I look forward to your blogs this week of sharing what this process has meant. Look forward to you sharing what you've done as a result. And look forward to you being the people who continue to support change in your schools and your districts. And look forward to staying connected with everybody. And of course, thank you, Joe and Tony. You guys are awesome. It's been a fun conversation. And for George, thank you for inspiring everybody, for creating this, and for allowing everyone to come together and explore their own passions and just make an impact in schools. We appreciate it.
Thank you. We're going to play a little Boys II Men on the way out.
No.
Say goodbye.
No. Tony, do you believe this whole conversation started a couple years ago when we started Brand Ed? Yeah. Amazing. And here we are today.
I really thank you guys so much. We look forward to you. Keep the conversation going. We'll see you on Wednesday night. And thank you again. Thank you for all you do. Keep changing the world. Thank you.
Go get it.